Welcome, everybody, to our intense season of COTF meetings. Let's see. Before we get started, I just wanted to talk about calendar. I know that we've had a pretty ambitious calendar, but Michelle is moved from principal planner to resource planner as of November 20th. And so until we have it, I don't even know. We're posting for principal planners, but definitely until then, and probably even after then, I'm going to be lead staff support. So that does change a little bit because of a couple of days that I'm not going to be here. So if you wanted to just take during our welcome, if you want to just take a look at your calendars, we're going to need to reschedule next week's 25th. And I think the week after that, December 2nd, because I have to fly to LA that afternoon. Additionally, the increased public interest is wonderful, but we're getting a little big for conference room C. So we're going to double check the calendar and we're moving back down to the board. That way we have enough room. So
is the date change when? Second. We didn't change the date, so there's just a few that we need to reschedule or
either reschedule or we're canceling. Only.
Maybe we could cancel the 25th and reschedule the 2nd. Is that possible? So
I am open to that.
It'll be hard to.
I'll be out the 3rd and 4th, but I'll be back on the 4th. So
the 5th or 6th.
5th or 6th.
I won't be here the 5th or 6th.
You won't be here the 5th or 6th?
No.
Okay. Are there any other absences, the 5th and 6th? I know the closer we get to holidays. And when are you on, Paul?
I will be in Portugal first from the 8th or 9th through like. That's what I will be here.
So you'll be out for December pretty much.
December and
after,
a big chunk of January.
Okay.
I'll be gone in December 5th.
Okay, so we have 2 gone of our normal 5 that I rely on.
I'll be here.
You'll be here? Awesome.
5th and 6th.
1, 2, 3. So we still haven't made quorum.
Yeah.
Oh wait, you can be here. You could be here the 5th?
Yeah, that'd be the last one.
So that'd be 4. So we still haven't made quorum. Okay, so
I can check. If you schedule it for the 5th, I'll be here.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ruby, can you just set a task to reach out to the other task force members to see if the 5th is it works for them?
Yeah.
All right. That's the Thursday. Right? Are we talking about the Thursday? All right, I need to reschedule some stuff.
Yeah.
No, 2nd and 4th. And Ruby,
Yes.
could you please also check, board chambers availability for that time and date?
Of course.
Thanks. All right, so I missed a humdinger of a meeting, didn't I? Let's recap, just to make sure that I'm on the same page, because I need a little bit of updating.
Are we on recording and all?
Are we on and recording, Ruby?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, wait. You can bring me up to speed after we do roll call.
Catherine Vanderwall. Here. Nara Delbaca. Here. Rebecca Harper. Here. Jennifer Smith. Here. The Fire District Representative, which they're not present. William Wise.
Here.
Richmond Kelly.
Present.
And Robert Geary, who is not present.
Okay. Number 3, discussion and consideration. We had talked about Lake County important farmland. Okay, so let's talk about the farmland protection zone map. We don't currently have a map. If I understand correctly, it was requested that staff produce a map with the updated, make sure we've got the latest map of statewide importance of the farmland. What's that called? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the soils type kind of farmland map. Cross-checked with a plotting of every single cultivation permit that we have. So we don't currently have it tracked like that, so we won't be able to produce that. So the way I see it going then is if the task force is not comfortable moving forward with a recommendation on this without that map, what we'll do is just take that out as no recommendation, and just include it with no recommendation for the board. But at this point, I don't think that I can set aside enough staff time to actually create a map like that. Additionally, we also don't have the staff time available to go through all of the 157 permits that we have and track which ones are done in pots and which ones are in the ground. But the task force is welcome at any time to come and peruse the records that we do have. So, but we do not have a mechanism right now to track that. I think that the best we can do is tell you that we have so many permits at these locations, but and they're outdoor. So some of them are going to be in pots and some of them are going to be in the ground. Let's see. So how would the task force care to proceed on that during the farmland protection zone?
I would like to look at the public comment that was submitted regarding the vote that was taken. There was some public comment that specifically has questions regarding that, so I think now would be an appropriate time.
This community action project?
It appears so.
Okay. And this will tell us how we're going to proceed?
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, there's just a question here that says, CAP is seeking clarification on the 3-2 vote on the revision of FPZ Ordinance 3101. It appears to CAP that the motion carried with a 3-2 vote. It is our understanding that the governance of the COTF calls for a majority vote of convened members who define a quorum, which was achieved November 15th.
Okay. So there was a motion and it passed 3-2?
Well, the vote was 3 in favor and 2 opposed, but staff had determined that it didn't pass.
Why?
That's a good question.
Okay. So we have bylaws about,
Yeah, I was curious.
yeah, we don't have bylaws for task force. We have bylaws for planning commission.
Yeah.
But this is not the same kind of a decision-making body as task force. So I would think that a 3-2 vote is probably passed.
Unless we were a consensus-based committee, which we're not.
Correct. Right. So one thing that I think is important is as we get to these more nuanced or contentious items, it's going to be important that we start recording the vote. Just so the board kind of understands, because typically, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've gone over this last 2 years has been pretty easy consensus stuff, and we've all just kind of been fine with it. Going forward, though, with these other more policy decisions, let's make sure that Ruby, I'm talking to you. Let's make sure that we're capturing, you know, the vote. So we already have who's present. We'll just make sure that we capture who's voted no on something.
And you can do a vote by roll call, if that makes it easier for review. That's pretty common.
Sure, we could. We could also just say all those in favor say aye and all those not say no, and then record who says no. That'll be fine. Okay. Anything else from this letter?
So did that motion pass, or?
I'm reversing that decision. Yeah, that passes 3-2. So I think that was an error that we're correcting now. Anything else from this one?
No, so that would just mean that our starting point on FPZ now would be that a motion passed to recommend changes to the FPZ, if that's what it's going to be continued to be called, map boundaries.
So the motion then that passed 3-2 was that the FPPZ map, that like what the board had with the blobs, be amended to include prime, unique, local, and statewide importance lands.
Yeah.
That's correct? Okay, and did we record that who was voted no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only 5 of us here.
In my notes, it does read, the motion was to amend. I think that she was questioned after the meeting and she had already closed her laptop. This was Michelle. And, she didn't know the response to that because we had had a significant time that had lapsed between. I think that's where the confusion was.
Okay. So now we got that clarified. Did we cover any of the rest of this stuff? B through?
No, we tabled because we wanted more information on the number of projects that would be affected by this and impacted that may have already been approved.
I think it's pretty safe to say it's a lot.
It's a lot. And with the 10-year rule, it could be potentially catastrophic for the finances of the county if the projects aren't allowed to renew after 10 years.
Well, it's a point then that we would need clarification on. Is this a brand new permit after 10 years or is it an extension?
Right.
Because if it's an extension, it's understandable that legal non-conforming entitlements continue.
And does that change?
Which it hasn't said it was an expiration, did it? Or did it just say it had to be? I don't know. Let's take a look at that. Okay. Rebecca, I'm sorry, I cut you.
No, you were going to answer my
Okay.
question anyways.
Okay.
And that's the second question on this public comment, the grandfathering. That was the next question on here.
Oh, yeah, there's no such thing as grandfathering. We have, our zoning ordinance allows for illegal non-conforming, so I would just respond to that, go ahead and check out the article in the zoning ordinance, because we'll go by that.
I think that the reason that question may have been asked is because the term grandfather was used like several times throughout the meeting.
It is kind of an easier term, but
Right.
it is technically legal non-conforming use. So what does the task force want to do? Should we continue down the letters of the farmland protection, important farmland to B? This would be 1,000-foot setback from FPZ.
I think we should because at this point, given the reversal, the projects that are going to be impacted are a lot. And we may need to look at potentially adding hoop houses as a way to cover.
I thought we were talking about hoop houses last week.
We were, but then since the entire thing got tabled or potentially, or it was put off for future discussion based on Jen and I asking for more data, which I think we were going to, when we looked at it, we thought we were going to revote now that we...
Was there additional data that I didn't address already?
There isn't, however...
I mean, additional data
There
request.
may be, an ability for LCCA or other folks within the industry to put out for people to look up whether they're going to be in one of those zones for their either future project or existing project. And so we may be able to at least have some folks that self-report.
Right, because at this point now we're saying any land of importance to the state has to have foundations with greenhouses on them.
Right.
Right. Which I'm pretty sure was not the intent of the board. So that's going to be an interesting discussion once it does get to them, just because it is so far reaching. I don't know, but it's up to them to see what they want to do with the recommendation.
Right. And so just giving them the option of hoop houses, which would help keep that land permeable and that soil intact.
Mhm.
Giving that to them as a potential solution were they to approve this recommendation.
Good. So let's just take a moment and see where that would be in our agenda. And if it's not here, we will get it on there.
And that would be achieved by amending the introductory
I think you're right.
paragraph.
That's
of
pretty
the
tidy.
FPG.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not actually A through.
No, you're right. Yeah, because it's right in the introduction about limited to indoor mixed light and greenhouses.
Yeah, so all we've done so far is amend the map. We haven't actually made any other changes.
Mhm. Well, we've made a recommendation for the map to be
Right.
amended.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at that intro then.
So A on there, outdoor cultivation, hoop houses under state definition, is outdoor. So we may.
We already have a nomenclature issue right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, because calling it outdoor is not the same as what it meant then. So, yeah, we could call it, I guess full sun outdoor or,
Exposed.
unsheltered,
Or outdoor without,
Sungrown.
sun-grown. Is that an industry term? Okay. But you could be sun-grown with hoop houses too, right?
yeah,
Not necessarily. You can mix light, but like that.
it may be outdoor cultivation without the use of hoop houses. Is prohibited, something like that.
Sun.
So outdoor would require hoop houses.
Mm-hmm. We could change a outdoor cultivation without hoop houses shall not be allowed.
Mhm.
We can just change A, right? And just kind of lightly tweak the intro to match A. Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's called,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's still outdoor, so it'd be outdoor without a hoop house would not be allowed in those zones. A lot of negatives.
It really is, yeah. But I think when you start with terminology that then becomes outdated, like how would they meant outdoors when it was passed, then it's going to feel stilted to correct that. Anything else from the task force, or should we open it up to public input? Go ahead, Margot.
Just something for clarification. I think it would be helpful that if we follow protocol and let the task force have comment first and then let public have comment, because it gets confusing for people on Zoom to follow who's saying what.
Isn't that just what we just did?
No, members of the public have been speaking during task force time.
Oh,
She spoke.
okay, thank you. Actually, I found that pretty helpful, but you're right. Okay.
Well, unless
Let's
you want
get
to
back.
change the rules, I mean, that's fine.
Nope, I don't want to change the rules. Thank you. All right, public input in the Zoom room. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Maria. I was going to ask if the person that's sitting next to you, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I was going to ask if you could, if they could say their name, because I don't know who that is. And then my other question is, before we get too deep into changing stuff, the last line of the introduction, after it says mixed light and greenhouses that are equipped with filtration systems that prevent the movement of odors, pesticides, and other airborne contaminants out of or into the structure. So that was the whole goal of having an FPZ, was to have filtration systems that keep everything contained. Can a filtration system, excuse me, can a filtration system be put on a temporary hoop housing? And would it require a building permit? Is that even something that's possible? Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Who else has their hand up? Oh, Autumn, would you state your name, please?
Autumn Carsey.
Yeah, thanks.
And it looks like it says iPad.
iPad guest.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Richard Durham. I had a couple of points here on the important farmlands of statewide importance, the unique farmlands, and farmlands of local importance. I spoke last week and mentioned that, these carry different crops at different times, and sometimes crops are in vogue and sometimes they're not. And I suggested we can eliminate a lot of these issues if that we would define these farmlands a little deeper and put a caveat on them that if they remain fallow for more than 2 years, they could lose their farmland of importance designation, and any other crop could be grown on them. And also on the setbacks, the screening, the hoop houses. So I noticed that they want 1,000-foot setback, which is kind of ridiculous. The vegetation screening, they want natural trees that are wood. So there would be, for example, oak trees. And the major use permit is for 10 years. It takes over 20 years to grow an oak tree that would screen anything. And so I just think that, by tiptoeing around all these farmlands of importance, we're just complicating everything, way overcomplicating it. And you could probably streamline everything by just sunsetting their the importance factor. I understand that prime farmland is prime farmland, and that should stay always, but the others are kind of subjective. And I guess that's my last point.
Thanks, Richard. Any other hands up?
It's Mr. Uchetti.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what Angela's saying. I don't think hoop houses resolve the issue due to the language you see here in the Lake County Important Farmland statement, and she paraphrased it, so I won't repeat it all, but it has to do with filtration systems, odors, pesticides, etc. So we're not solving it by going to hoop houses. Unfortunately, it just doesn't solve the problem. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sarah Bodnar.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Sarah Bodnar, consultant. Unfortunately, I think this direction is taking a left turn in a really bad way for the County of Lake. To choose to designate all farmland as locked in and not having property owners with the right to sell their properties to a potential cannabis farmer or to diversify. I don't think it's in the best interest of the county. And I don't think it's in the best interest of those who farm and who own these parcels. In this comment, I want to focus on the setbacks, as we've talked many times in this task force about how cookie cutter policies pose a lot of problems in practice, and setbacks is one of the most problematic. When we have really large setbacks that are just blanket policy, it doesn't allow for the use permit process to work. And the use permit process is a discretionary site-specific review of each particular proposed project and each particular location. And I think allowing projects to go through that review and determine what setbacks, if any, are appropriate is the better path here. What we can see is that these excessively large setbacks don't allow property owners to sometimes use the most optimal part of their property. And by optimal, I mean the most environmentally appropriate, the location with the least impacts. And you essentially have like a very arbitrary number determining how agriculture should happen. And agriculture is not a cookie cutter process. It's incredibly nuanced. And with all of the regulatory overlays for cannabis, your location and where you can grow on your property is very delicate. So I'd like to see, this task force consider allowing the setbacks to be determined by staff and all of the many levels of environmental review that happen, and leave that up to a site-specific discretionary process. Thank you.
Sarah.
And then next we have Jordan.
Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
Hi, I think his name was Rich, or also iPad. I fully agree with what he said about the shrubbery hedge. Growing a 20-foot tall tree is going to take decades, as opposed to there could be some type of, flower bush that's 10 feet tall and beautiful and feed the environment and the bees and things like that. And then I also fully agree with what Sarah said. I think she made a lot of good points, and it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Jordan. We're going to bring it back into the room for a minute. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Tom Lasik. I just want to make a question and a comment. It's my understanding that this task force is actually not here to establish policy. Policy is established by the board. So, is that true?
This task force was appointed to come up with recommendations that will be forwarded to the board for decision, correct?
Okay. Yeah, because farmland protection zone is something that I understand has been established as policy by the board. Now, there might be people that don't like that policy, and there's fair points for that. But are we here to change that policy? I don't think so. Same thing with the setbacks. The setback is established. So I understand that as part of policy. Getting rid of it might be contravening that policy. That was attempted a few weeks ago, and this task force said no. I think it would be, since you guys are tight on time, trying to get through this is to focus on the ordinances and to make sure to support the policies. If there are improvements and recommendations that can be made, that should be the focus and charge of the task force. I get it. There are certain things in the policy I don't like, but that's not my place, if I was a task force member, to try to change that. At least not here.
Thank you. Going back to Zoom room.
Looks like Nikki.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Hi. So I know that you guys are talking about cultivation, and I just kind of wanted to jump in and ask if there was any kind of timeline or agenda in mind to talk about the other aspects of the cannabis industry for this ordinance?
Thanks, Nikki. Yep, I think that we talk about the other ones later on, but we haven't finished with cultivation yet. Are there any other hands up?
I understand it's just been like a long time of talking about cultivation, and there are people who are in the industry in the retail aspect that have been told, you know, like, oh, it's going to be this time, it's going to be this time to talk about it, and we're still just like patiently waiting. So we're kind of asking for like when that time's going to be.
Thanks, Nikki. I don't have that right now, but we'll keep that in mind going forward. I appreciate it.
And Nikki, can you state your last name?
Okay, bringing it back to the task force. Oh, Andrew, right?
Yes, thank you.
Andrew.
Andrew
Oh,
Dobbs.
can you oh yeah, sorry.
Andrew Dobbs Kramer. Thank you for the time. I just want to state, I think that using land use policy to address a hypothetical conflict between two types of agriculture is just generally not great policy, and is going to lead to a lot of unforeseen pitfalls. It's also not ideal for the landowners. If we want to preserve traditional ag, we want the landowners of these parcels to be able to diversify, and tying their hands is not maybe the best policy. We don't use land use policy to differentiate between conventional and organic farming, or any other type of farming for that matter. Further, that hypothetical perceived problem we've been discussing here has been pesticide drift primarily, I believe. And it seems that hoop houses would address that problem. So I think the idea of adding outdoor with hoop houses as a clarification to subsections A, B, and C here would do a lot to further refine this policy to actually address the concerns that we're trying to address.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to make a few clarification points on this. I would like to get the clarification on the legal non-conforming structures that have already been passed within the county, because I know that affects a lot of individuals that are spending, you know, some tens of millions of dollars to come here and cultivate, and to take those permits after they've developed infrastructure, buildings, prop things up. I think it's just counterintuitive.
I'm not sure I understand your question. We don't have legal non-conforming.
When your 10-year permit expires.
Assuming that this is going to happen? This is going to happen.
So that was one.
We can do what we have currently probably, but not for the entire, not assuming that the map would change. That's too many. We don't have a tracking mechanism for all that right now. I think it's safe to say that it would be a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, because originally they were going off of the board's intent to have it mostly in the rural areas, but we have those soils in the rural areas. So it would be changing. I mean, if it wasn't changing every single one, it'd be pretty close.
Yeah, and if you're changing the ordinance to that effect, wouldn't it go back to the voters for a vote, because the voters voted for this? And if you use back channels through CDD to create a pathway for, cultivation not to be extended past that 10-year mark, it seems like that would be a voter initiative, not a.
I think that's a reasonable discussion at the board meeting. Sorry to not let you finish your sentence. But Article 27 was not voted on by the voters. That was determined by the board. The desire to regulate cannabis within Lake County was definitely a voter initiative.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you wipe out all the qualifications, it goes against the voters.
Yeah, that's something that the board would have to talk about. That's not before us today.
Okay. And if we're talking about protecting soils, I don't see how pouring concrete slabs on top of them protects them in any way, shape, or form. And greenhouses, when you talk about airborne contaminants into or out of the structure, greenhouses change their whole cubic environment every minute. They push new air into the greenhouse. There are no closed loop greenhouse systems, which seems to be the intent here. That just doesn't exist. Greenhouses move air.
Thank you. Is there any other public input in the room?
Peter has his hand raised in Zoom.
Mr. Lucetti, if you could just keep it quick, since you've already had your first shot,
Oh,
thanks.
we do actually have another one as well.
Do we? Okay, well, we'll get to you in a minute. Who else?
Is it my turn or somebody else's?
One moment, Mr. Lucetti. I think it's somebody else had their hand up for the first
That's
time.
fine. That's perfectly
Back to
okay.
you.
Let me know when I'm allowed to speak. Thank you.
Sure thing.
So, Holly.
Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi, Holly Harris. Actually, I was just hoping that people could speak up. I could not hear a single thing that was said by the woman that just spoke. Thank you.
Thanks. Where is our microphone? I thought we were supposed to be getting a better one.
Yeah, it's technically not in my webcam.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lucetti.
Yeah, you asked me to be brief. Others have perhaps not been so brief, but let me try. I want to reinforce Tom's point. You know, are we talking about ordinances? Are we talking about policy? Are we talking about advocacy? And all three things are going on here. I don't have a problem with those three things going on here, but I don't think that it's the meeting's intention to embrace all three of those things. If it is the meeting's intention to embrace all those three of those things, I'd like to read my entire paper into the record and open up the entire policy discussion, which revolves around a fairly critical analysis of the 154 plus neg decks that have been approved to date. I don't think it's your intention to do that, and I'm not asking you to do it. I'm just saying if we're going to creep into policy and advocacy, then I think everything's on the table and we need to crack this wide open. So I'll leave it to your leadership to guide us and provide us with the right direction on the scope you want to take on the task force. Thank you.
Is there any other public input? Not, we'll bring it back to the task force for discussion.
There's none in Zoom.
I just want to address that comment and the other around policy. Changing and expanding the FPZ zone was a policy decision, so it can't have it both ways. So we either get to decide on policy and discuss cannabis and the cannabis ordinance holistically, or we are stuck within the parameters of what the board has already approved, which is the existing FPZ zone. So
my understanding of the mandate of the board was to appoint a task force to update cannabis regulations. Ordinance 3101, by establishing rules that have to be followed, is a regulation. So we are fully within our purview and in fact are expected to develop recommendations on this one. So if we could keep going forward, that would be great. If the task force would like to go ahead and discuss the introductory paragraph under Lake County Important Farmland, I think that's what's before us right now.
the original typo is still in there. And then
Which original typo?
the farming and agriculture in Lake County.
I'm sorry, let's remember. That was there's an updated, yeah, that I passed.
Another one.
Is the one with the agenda, I couldn't remember those one.
Right. It was a duplicate with the job. So what page is it?
15.
All right, so it says in. Excellent.
So in that introductory paragraph where it says mixed light, I propose we delete and, so mixed light greenhouses or outdoor and hoop houses. I think we should have a discussion around what a filtration system means, given that it could be a power issue. And given what the testimony or given the public comment that Autumn mentioned about greenhouses and the way that air works. That big bucket to that introductory paragraph, in addition to possibly adding another letter in the following language.
What do you think about changing to cultivate outdoors? Because greenhouses are technically outdoors. We have an opportunity to clarify that if we are going to allow greenhouses. And I don't think we should say can't cultivate outdoors anymore. You know, it's just confusing. And one of the things we're supposed to be doing is making it easier to understand.
How about that shall be limited to mixed light greenhouses and hoop houses? And
instead of saying, if an applicant finds their project in an area where they should not be allowed to cultivate outdoors, why don't we take that out and say, within the farmland protection zone, cannabis cultivation shall be limited to indoor mixed light greenhouses and hoop houses.
Also think, to address the closed greenhouse concern, the word prevents could be amended to limited.
Wait, could you say that part again, please?
If we're acknowledging that maybe there are closed loop greenhouse systems or closed loop air filtration systems, the last sentence of the paragraph could read, your amendment or NARA's amendment, greenhouses that are equipped with filtration systems that limit the movement of odors, pesticides, and other airborne contaminants out of or into the structure.
So the greenhouses would have to have filtration systems, but not the hoop houses.
No, that would apply to all of the acceptable uses that you had already listed. I'm just saying we would.
Yeah, I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah, acknowledging that something can't be prevented, but it could be limited by those previously listed uses. Yeah, which would include indoor mixed light greenhouse or hoop house cultivation, which was what I think was just listed.
So take prevents out and add limits.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it may not be filtration systems, but it may be systems or mechanisms that limit movement of odors, pesticides.
Okay. First of all, I guess people can't hear us. This is Jennifer. I guess they're having a really hard time hearing us on the Zoom call and getting messages from multiple people.
Let's move the Zoom cam. Ruby, can you put the camera on the table? That way the microphone will be a little closer. Not that I like it. Sorry, people watching on Zoom, avert your eyes so you don't get seasick. All right. Hey, Holly, is this better?
You're the only one people can hear.
I can hear you. I'm talking right to the camera. Okay. Well, we'll just do our best to sort of talk that way, which is yeah.
Okay. Now, aside from that comment, I'm really struggling with this because we are being pushed into zones for an agricultural crop that are historically on parcels that don't have power, and it takes 3 to 5 years to get power. And we are increasing the electrical load on these properties by requesting fans and filtration systems on a carbon sequestering plant. So I'm really struggling with the infrastructure we are requiring because of land designations, when quite honestly, I struggle as a constitutionalist, like, where are our land use rights here? And I mean, there are crops that have been grown alongside other crops that don't historically get along, and people use their best management processes. Cotton and peaches is a great example in Southern California. You used to not be able to grow those two crops within a certain mileage of one another, and now you can, because they got together and figured out if you harvest the cotton before, then the weevils won't go into the peach trees. Like, this is just getting ridiculous. We're talking about agriculture here.
What do you recommend?
I recommend that we stop and, like, seriously look at these FPZ zones, these exclusion zones. We're banning agriculture from agricultural parcels.
This is an attempt, a very transparent attempt to take cannabis out of Lake County. It's clear that is the intent of the group that proposed this, that they would love nothing more than 10 years once these expire for cannabis to go away. And I think that the financial implications for people who have invested in the county for the county itself are potentially deeply problematic and potentially present an illegal taking. And I want to say that, and hopefully people can hear me in the Zoom room, but this is a cynical effort to stop one plant in particular from being grown in this county. That's had a long and historic community and history in this county. And people have spent a lot of money and taken a lot of efforts to comply with pretty intense regulations, restrictions, and stepped out into the light and asked to be regulated. And I want to call this what it is, which is prohibitionism.
I have a suggestion. The board has put forward a daunting task for this task force. We've been working on it for a couple of years. I think that ordinance 3101 may be too contentious for us, given that it is strictly a policy decision from the board. If the task force is amenable, let's set it aside and let's keep going on what we can get consensus on.
That was suggested last week. That would yeah.
But we did reach consensus on a recommendation. I mean, there was a recommendation that was passed. So at this point, to say that we wouldn't be able to reach consensus on other potential recommendations, I think is really ignorant.
And that's what
we're seeing that it wouldn't go.
That's exactly what I'm saying is let's move on to other things where we can determine recommendations.
But we have been able to determine recommendations on this topic specifically.
The only reason
it came down our throats yesterday or last week when there was 3 agricultural advocates in this room, and
that's the nature of the task force.
It was a very biased representation that day.
There's been other times where there's been folks from the cannabis industry and less ag folks. I mean, that's the way that it works. And I think that it's immature to be treating it this way just because something doesn't go, the way that you hope it would. There's plenty of things that
this task force, your job is to get recommendations. We understood 2 years ago that some of these topics were going to be contentious. The way this discussion and the terms that we are using now, in my opinion, is completely dysfunctional.
Who has used those terms?
We're using value-laden terms amongst ourselves that is actually destroying the rapport that we have built over the last 2 years. And our working relationship. Because I don't see this as a fruitful exercise, I would like to set ordinance 3101 aside and continue on the other topics that we have before us. And then if we have an intent to do so, we can bring it back towards the end.
Because that recommendation went forward, and because of the reversal of staff's decision from last week, is there a way to put a note along with that recommendation that?
And I think that it's a good one to send.
You can still add, but you can add a note that.
Right. I just want to clarify, just because some folks aren't familiar with how meetings are run, doesn't that the vote was what the vote was. Just because somebody's not familiar with how that works,
the way the vote was reported, other conversations took place or did not take place because of that misunderstanding. Right. So I don't think it's safe to say that just because that was wrong doesn't mean that there wasn't meaningful conversation that may have not been able to take place at that time. So,
do we need a motion in order to table this? I mean, it seems like it would be an action on the task force's part in order to table it.
I agree. That's why it was my recommendation.
And would potentially table the only potential mitigation to this recommendation that we've discussed. And I do worry about that.
It's up to the will of the task force. It was only a suggestion.
Yes.
But if y'all want to keep going, then let's do it. What's the will of the task force?
Again, my intention is to get through as much of this as possible. And if we can't have, I mean, we're here to make recommendations to the board.
I guess I'm just a little bit confused because when we left last week, I was under the impression that there were potential compromises to be made regarding the inclusion of hoop houses as an acceptable use in FPZ. So I'm confused, that is my perception of where we left off on Friday. And so for it to be in this place now where we apparently can't agree on anything, I just, maybe I'm confused. Maybe I don't know what happened. I'm curious.
Speaking for myself, I don't think that that's how I feel, that nothing more can move forward. I was shocked that the vote was recorded the way it was recorded as not passing. And I'm not saying that hoop houses aren't still a viable, middle ground for all of us. But to increase the size and scope of lands that are now considered protected without any visibility into what that map is just seems arbitrary to me. And
well, I mean, we saw the map, what the FMMP map was and what the FPZ map is. So I don't know. We weren't able to see some of the other overlays, which I also agreed, would have been valuable to see. But given that that's not possible, I mean, we just have to figure out what the path is to move forward if that's not possible. Right? I mean,
why is it not possible to see all the lands that would now encompass?
It is.
Well, we have I keep pointing at that map. We have the statewide map. I mean, that's what we're looking at.
That's what we
last
looked
week. Yeah.
Right. But then it was requested to add let's read the motion. There was requested to add, I think 4 additional classifications.
Those additional classifications were illustrated on the map that we were looking at.
Yeah. So it would just be the statewide map, pretty much. All of their classifications.
Right. Their classifications are statewide, farmland of statewide importance, farmland of local importance, unique farmland, and the other one.
What we don't have is the overlay that plots all of the existing permits or permits in process.
The map that we looked at that was on the conservation website, that would have been all of the areas that would be included in FPZ as per my motion.
I guess, what are the current restrictions or setbacks from all of those? Is the intent to just be able to use one term?
Yeah, it would make all of those FPZ because FPZ was a zone that was created only for the exclusion of cannabis. That was the only thing that FPZ ever.
So then if you can plant currently in a greenhouse or indoor on a prime farmland parcel, correct?
Yes.
And so now changing that to an FPZ parcel, what does that do?
No, with the prime, it is not barred, it's not currently prohibited from outdoor in prime farmland. It is currently prohibited outdoor within those areas that the board did on that map. Remember that map that had the circled areas? Yeah, that is where outdoor is currently prohibited, not prime ag soils. It happens to overlap for the most part, but there was nothing in the South County, which there's a little bit of prime ag soils. So the vote to include all the soils within FPPZ in effect takes those little focused circles and spreads them out a lot further.
FMMP. Just for clarification. FMMP. Not FPPZ. It's
What's
confusing.
the farmland protection?
There's a lot of letters. That's FPZ. It would be expanded to include the FMMP.
So the farmland protection zone would be excluded to include all of those different types of soil types. In effect, it would.
Sorry, not all the different soil types because we limited it to.
Right, the prime.
Already listed.
Yeah, there are other categories, including
so prime, which is like class 1 through 4, as well as a number of other ones. Unique, local, statewide.
Do you want to see the maps on the bring them in?
The task force like to see the map.
I have a very good understanding of what the map is, so it's not necessary for me, but I'm happy to look at it again if others would like to.
So that's what we were talking about, is expansion of the FPZ to include a significant increase in the different types of soils. Which, if the board approved that, without further discussion of what I thought we were talking about was allowing hoop houses as well. So without that, yes, it would be a significant change.
Yes.
We talk about hoop houses.
I think we should, because currently this is such a significant recommendation going to the Board of Supervisors that I think there should be something in there for them to potentially consider.
I thought that was the road we were heading down prior to the assumptions and name calling.
Sorry for name calling. It was, I believe, ignorant and
I didn't say anybody specifically. I said name calling, that everybody's encompassing that.
I didn't use the word ignorant.
Can I speak?
Take a 5-minute break.
I'd like to speak, considering that I think I'm being
Let's
implicated.
go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Thank you. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. We're all back. Convene. So I think there was a certain string of events at the last meeting that may have led to a misunderstanding that I think we should just sort of clarify or address. That the vote was 3-2. Staff said that that did not pass. So because there was a misunderstanding, although it did pass, the task force could take a vote to reconsider if it wanted to. So I was just talking to county council to see what options we might have. I just wanted to place that in front of you.
Does that usually a motion to reconsider has to be made by one of the prevailing votes?
He just said that it had to be passed by the task force.
Motions to reconsider are typically only made on the same day that the original motion was made. So I don't know if.
Let me check back in and see if that applies here.
Yeah.
So I'm not giving you the wrong data.
And I think part of the confusion was that with the statement made that the motion didn't pass. So that's the impression the task force was under. So that's where the other options or information was being to look at. But let's look at alternatives to kind of, at least my understanding was like, well, let's look at alternatives and get some more information, and then we'll kind of circle back around to.
So yeah, I really wanted there to be an opportunity for folks who were potentially impacted by that change to be able to know that the discussion was happening. And because that was a really large request that came in from a member of the public, and not a member of the task force or staff. So
I would have made that motion regardless of any input from a member of the public if that helps provide clarification.
I don't think that members of the cannabis community had, like I said, I would have, that was part of the reason to potentially bring back and look at the actual number of projects, both approved and in the pipeline, that would be impacted by such a large decision. I think we don't even have a clear understanding of the amount of acreage that this increases the FPZ by.
It doesn't matter. The vote is a vote.
We're not doing public input right now.
Well, the public's.
If you're not going to mute yourself, we'll mute you on this end. This is before the task force for discussion from where we left off.
You know, I think it was what was agendized, the argument that certain folks weren't here to discuss it. I mean, it show up for the meeting. I don't know. It was agendized. So I don't know how.
This is Will, just for those having trouble hearing. I'd made note during the last meeting of just the number of public comments on one side or the other, and noted that there were 6 or 7 folks from the cannabis industry who were present, 3 of whom I understand to be consultants by their own definition of their involvement in this conversation. But there were an equal number of public comments from members of the public not affiliated with cannabis. In my mind, that's good attendance, that's good public turnout, that's good input from all sides involved, just as one point related to what's being discussed. For last meeting. Similar attendance today.
Barry's going to go get the clarification from county council. So until then, should we talk about hoop houses?
I think some of this discussion is driven by the fact that when we talked about hoop houses earlier in this project, many people thought that it would be a pathway forward for those that were in the FPZ zone. And it was actually turned out to not be the case. We did not allow hoop houses to assuage that and the words mandate that they are in greenhouses or indoor. So I think that that needs to be addressed for sure, because currently they're not, and so we have to see if they're going to be. Like, that discussion needs to be had. Sorry, way too many words to not get through this.
So the discussion then is
it does need to have, regardless of where we
end
up.
Allowed use within the farmland protection zone. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So that's one thing that definitely needs to happen regardless of this. I think we need to discuss, are we going to allow hoop houses in the FPZ zone to meet the requirements that have currently been established for FPZ? And then are we going to increase the types of farmland that meet that are now going to be called FPZ?
Hey.
Oh,
So the question, I let them that they had the option to make a motion and to reconsider the vote that was taken last week, but we had a couple follow-up questions as to whether that motion to reconsider is only allowed on the same date, and whether or not this person, if I understand correctly, the person who made the motion then has to also make the motion to reconsider. Did I get that right?
Or whether the motion to reconsider has to be made by one of the prevailing votes.
One of the people who voted
not necessarily the motion maker, but one of the ayes.
So on the same day issue, that would not be an issue. It would be able to be reconsidered today. Offhand, I cannot give a solid answer on the second portion. That's something I would have to look into, honestly. I don't want to give offhand.
Okay. Well, that's helpful.
Let me swing back and see if I can if I can find something quickly. I'll send you an email, okay?
Awesome. I'll appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, we could like just, we can wait for him.
We can discuss the I'm happy to continue discussing the hoop house language, but if the rest of the task force is running up along, then we can figure out whether we will consider. Or we can leave this and get on to the rest of the staff list and see if we can build some consensus there.
Is there a preference with the rest of the task force?
Public comment?
On whether or not we're setting it aside? It's kind of before the task force. So how do we want to do that? Would the task force continue to prefer to stay on farmland protection zone, or while we're waiting for Joseph, should we take up operational hours? Seems harmless. I think we can do that one. Okay, operational hours.
Why would we go on to operational?
Because last time we started on the list, and I showed that we had some progress on 1, 2, and 3. So
Not 3.
Not 3?
We
Oh,
haven't made it to 3.
oh, we left off here. You're right. Sorry. Help if I read the notes that Michelle was written. Okay, setbacks consistent with water board. So let me give you a little bit of the background on this one. The ordinance was as you can read it in the italics. Then the board had a discussion about it. I guess in 2020, talked about they approved a resolution of intent for consideration of the setbacks to just mirror the water board setbacks. But it never, that's where the ball got dropped. It never went back to the planning commission where it should have been. It should have gone by at that time. And so when we realized that we're already meeting with the task force, so we thought, okay, let's just bring it forward to the task force. But the board would like consideration of just synchronizing setbacks to mirror the water board setbacks. Which if anybody doesn't have that, I'll go ahead and read it. That it's outdoor cultivation, including any topsoil, pesticide, or fertilizers used for cultivation for the cultivation of cannabis shall not be located within 100 feet of any spring, top of bank, or any creek or seasonal stream, edge of lake, delineated wetland, or vernal pool. And then it gave the 7.79 ROMC for determination from the lake. So I think the difference is that the state's setback is 50 feet, whereas ours is 100 feet.
So this was discussed,
oh, I'm sorry. I told you the wrong thing. It actually did go to the planning commission.
Yeah, it didn't go to the board.
Right. It didn't get back to the board for approval.
But does that make it something we need to weigh in on, or was it just on this list?
Well, because it's a cannabis item, I didn't want to bypass since you're already meeting. So that's why we added it.
what was the planning commission? Was there a
They were fine
determination
with it.
date?
Yeah.
With the 100 feet?
No, with the 50 feet. They were fine synchronizing, which is consistent with what we've been trying to do, is synchronize a lot of stuff with the state.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the language to align with state regulations.
Before you make a motion.
Oh, sorry, public comment.
Yeah. If there are no questions from the task force, let's take public comments on setbacks consistent with the water board. Anybody in the room? No. How about in Zoom? Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Bodnar.
Are you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get back to you. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah Bodnar, consultant. I think this was a fairly significant mea culpa for the county that the board gave this direction. It went through the planning commission, and then it failed to get back to the board due to a lot of turnover in CDD at the time. I've followed the meeting trail on this and the agenda items and the calendar pretty closely, and it just didn't make it back. And so I think this is an opportunity for the task force to align with the deliberation that has already happened, where the board's explicit direction was to align with state law, also the planning commission, and then that final meeting to approve these recommendations into policy never got agendized. So it's been a pretty big gap, actually, that was the intention of the county that never got formalized. And it has become an active problem for applicants who know that the county's intent is one thing and state law is another. And then the reality of the policy on the books is a third. And if we could bring all of those together, that would really help clarify and mean that we don't have conflicting policies at the local level and at the state level. So I would encourage the task force to adopt what the county has already supported and approved. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Peter. Oh, I don't think it's it.
I got it. Just had to unmute. I'm referring now to you, Maria, as director. There's been some very strong language used to the public, and particularly CAP, that's shown up to this meeting today. And I have to say, I'm quite upset about it. I think that I'd like to have an opportunity to discuss it. I think Ms. Dalbaca has made statements about us that are inaccurate and incorrect. We're here at the table trying to have a conversation about how to revise cannabis policy in Lake County, and I think that's
Mr. Lucchetti, I hate to interrupt you, but do you have anything regarding setbacks consistent with the water board?
Are you refusing to take my input?
No, I'm asking for your input relevant to the topic that we're conversing on.
Well, a lot of conversation is going on here that hasn't been relevant to the topic. So now I'm held to a different standard. Is that what we're talking about?
That is my request.
Okay. I'll read to you then. While the state water board allows 50 feet setback for class 3 water courses that are capable of sediment transport, the state does not consider where sediment will ultimately end up. In Lake County, many ephemeral water courses lead to larger bodies of water, Clear Lake, Highland Springs, Blue Lakes, etc., or other types of water courses, class 2 or class 1 or 2. Therefore, CAP requests the retention of the current 100-foot setback requirement. Additionally, as Clear Lake was recognized as public lands with 1,000-foot setbacks, the reference to Clear Lake should be removed or clarified. And I'll just conclude by saying, I'd like to take it offline with you, but I see a double standard here in the way the meeting is being run, and I would like to correct that with you. Thank you.
You. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Maria. I'm just going to say that I am in agreement with the statement that Peter just made regarding the setbacks consistent with the water board. And also just going back to hearing all of the discussion that's been going on, I'd also like to recommend that maybe we consider going back to, as it was brought up that some people don't have time to look into these agenda items. So maybe we need to go back to considering on the agenda, not putting everything discussion and consideration. Maybe we need to go back to discussion and then the next meeting consideration as we were doing before to allow everybody time to go over these things. Thank you.
Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi, Holly Harris. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that 2 meetings ago, Clear Lake was considered to be public lands, and the setbacks are measured are 1,000 foot based on the full lake level of 7.79. So I just wanted to re-highlight that. Thank you.
Anybody else? iPad guest. Is that Richard?
Yeah.
Yes, it's Richard. Sorry. Richard Durham. Yeah, just to keep it simple, I think that we should align with the state on all matters concerning cannabis. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then there's one more, Trey. Oh,
Trey, I think your hand's up. Yeah, there he is. Go ahead, Trey.
Thank you. I just wanted to state my support for harmonizing surface water setbacks with the state. It would make a lot of things easy to figure out, knowing that all the rules are the same, and following those rules, we can apply the same measures. Thank you.
Right. Go ahead, Jordan. Oh, hold on, Jordan. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Aligning with the state just seems like a smooth path forward, quick and easy, and I think that's the right thing to do. Thanks.
No further hands in Zoom. Tom, you were waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tom Lacey, it's really more of a question. What is the motion that this task force is with relation to this topic? Is it to recommend the 50-foot setback, or is it to recommend taking what was already approved by the planning commission forward to the board? I wasn't clear as to specifically what the motion was about.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. Thank you. I appreciate the question. Autumn, did you have?
Yeah, just quickly, Bruno brought this motion forward, I think in 2020. The board voted to approve it, and then it went to planning commission, who also voted to approve it. I think what happened is there was a lot of staff turnover at the time with CDD, and it just didn't make it back into the ordinance for final approval. So I don't know why it's being presented again after it was already approved.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So, go ahead, Andrew.
Andrew Douglas Kramer. Just wanted to kind of echo some of the sentiments here. This is, I don't want to say overdue, but this is a long time coming. And aligning with the state is ostensibly the charge of this task force. And this seems like really a no-brainer here to align with the state water board that has done all of the studies and has all of the empirical data and is far more qualified to set these setbacks.
Okay, thanks. No further hands up. Let's bring it back to the task force for discussion. So as I introduced the item, but without the error, it was discussed by the board, who adopted a resolution of intent. So then it went to the planning commission, but then it never went back to the board. However, since it has to do with cannabis policy, and since we had an actively meeting cannabis ordinance task force, I did not want to bypass the task force, which did not actually ever talk about this in the first place. So the options before the task force, as I understand them, is you either agree to align with the state standards or you have a separate recommendation. And I don't think it's set in stone what that recommendation has to be. It's just, it would be other than synchronizing with the state standards, which is what will go before the board otherwise.
If the board has already taken a vote on this, I think it seems like it's some, it's seems to be settled, or at least their intent was made clear and to the planning commission. So it's a little strange to have something flow backwards from planning commission to us. But I would say that I think that the only change that would affect this is that that addition of that 1,000-foot setback from the edge of Clear Lake that this body did decide on a few weeks back.
To clarify though, this the resolution of intent was never codified, and that's why it's up for discussion again. Had it been codified, it would already be integrated into the ordinance, which it was not.
No, a resolution of intent does not change the ordinance. Right. It's just saying we're putting this before the planning commission to consider. Yeah. But it's not an actual ordinance, which is what codifies. So if the task force is done with their discussion.
What is the full language of? Is it just pretty much just that?
Mm-hmm. I think it had a few other things too. But the 50-foot from class 2 water courses didn't go back. It kind of got pieced up in its process. But the task force doesn't have to worry about resolution 2050. Just the only thing that's before you right now is aligning with state regulations.
So another question is, so it just says allows for 50 feet from class 3 water courses. So do we have other classes of water courses in this county? And if so, are there setbacks on those levels?
Yeah.
So are we only addressing class 3 water courses here, or are we addressing?
I think class 3 was the only one that was out of alignment with the state at the time. And I believe we were just asking for alignment with the state, so I think that should be the simplicity of the language.
Do we have any document that shows what the current setbacks are
right now
for other water courses?
That's my next question. Has anything changed since it was like 3 or 4 years ago?
On the water boards. Class 1 water courses is 150 feet. Class 2, which is intermittent water course or wetlands, is 100 feet. A fair mayor, I can never say that. Water courses, which is type 3, is 50 feet. Man-made irrigation water supply, etc., which is a class 4, is the riparian zone.
Mm-hmm.
And 27 starts on page 112, I believe.
Oh yeah, thanks. I always forget about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Scrolling is not efficient.
can't find it quickly what's in the county, but the goal would be again to align with the state.
We could be specific in the motion limiting it to class 3. I'm still looking
But
through
I
them.
think we would want all classes aligned. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Let me keep looking.
On another note, while we're waiting for county council, Maria, from the handbook is one good reason to reconsider would be if someone has obtained new information that might change the outcome of the vote. Simply being unhappy with the outcome and hoping for something different is not a reason to move to reconsider, which is why a member must have voted with the prevailing side to move this motion.
Thanks. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you checking that.
You're welcome.
So I've got, outdoor cultivation. All cultivation activities shall comply with the California State Water Board, Central Valley, a whole bunch of those water boards. Outdoor cultivation, including any topsoil. Didn't I just read that? Pesticide or fertilizers used for cultivation of cannabis shall not be located within 100 feet of any spring, top of bank, or any creek or seasonal stream, edge of lake, delineated wetland, or vernal pool.
What page is that?
27-136. Subsection C. But it's also what we read in the beginning of the
Oh, that's all that's in there?
Yeah, that I can find so far. I'll keep scrolling.
27-138.
38. Water use. No water diversion. And that we talk about water. Oh, okay, because I don't see anything on 38. I think that might be all it says, because now I'm at the end of cultivation.
It's not, there's a section of it also restated under stormwater management.
Is it anything different under stormwater management?
It's the same language.
Okay.
It has one section to cultivation activity shall comply with the California State Water Board, and then the next C under that is the same language that we're considering. 20. We have a couple of other sections too. So any motion will probably need to cover this in any section where it's listed, just to be safe.
Yeah, when we go into draft the ordinance, we'd take care of that.
The setbacks are cannabis specific again, right? Right.
Why would we not, sorry, Rich from Kelly, why would we not just align with the state regulations? Am I missing something on all three levels? Why are we?
I think we're just trying to make sure that if the other water courses are discussed throughout the ordinance, there's not also a motion to be made regarding those other water courses.
So if the yeah, I guess the task force could make an amendment or could make a recommendation then that we align with state regulations on water courses in general.
That motion be made with the caveat of the edge of Clear Lake and the 1,000-foot setback.
Absolutely, yeah, that would be for clarification.
That seems like what Richmond wants to do.
Nicely.
Glad you brought your interpreter today.
Yeah, well, this is, volley speak is not my strong suit. So we're waiting for the motion that we align everything with the state except for the 1,000 feet from Clear Lake. You can see that better. Looking your way.
I just think you should clarify the water courses. Align everything with the state is rather vague.
So how about if it includes any spring, top of bank, or any creek or seasonal stream, edge of lake, delineated wetland or vernal pool?
Are you talking about the classes?
Maybe just call the class.
Talking about the courses.
I know the state water board have to build them enough. They do some, you're talking about research. I had to go back to my research again, but they've done it. So my feeling is when the research is there, we should follow it.
Cannabis cultivation general order setback requirements are based on proximities to a surface water body per the requirement of the cannabis policy. This is from the water board. So I don't think we need to get into all that other language about vernal pools and whatnot.
Okay. So you want to tell Richmond what his motion is going to be?
Well, I'm open to
Your motion should probably be that you move to align setbacks from all classes of water courses consistent with state water board setback.
Yes.
But it's not, that's not my motion, so you would need to state it. Because I'm not
Okay, yeah. Who wants to help me with this one?
Okay.
So my motion would be that we do the state setbacks on which water courses? There was a long list there.
Probably just all.
2, 3, 1, 2, all. I think this is where.
Setbacks with state regs on all water courses.
Yes, and then 1,000 feet, except for 1,000 feet from Clear Lake, which we agreed on.
Right, exactly, yeah. Exception of Clear Lake, which is 1,000.
Do we need to specify at full lake level and something from 7 feet?
Yes, let's do that because that helps.
I'll second that.
Yeah, we're getting it done. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Is there anybody opposed? Okay. All right. So what, so far, what I've heard from County Council is that if it's organized under the same rules as the Planning Commission, then the prevailing party would have to bring the motion to reconsider. So prevailing party, so any of those who voted aye.
Which would be Catherine, Will, and I.
Okay. Is there any wish between the prevailing party members to bring that item back for reconsideration?
I will not be moving to reconsider.
Okay. Next. Do we want to go back then to farmland protection zone and start talking about greenhouses?
Greenhouses or hoop houses?
Yeah. Hoop houses. Sorry, my bad. Or we can talk about operational hours. Let's jump in. I think that hoop houses has some potential. If we can get through it.
Does Hoop House, this is Will, by the way, Are coop houses as defined currently, do they allow for equipment that would filter and control the flow of odor, pesticides, what have you? And does that fit within the definition of a hoop house as presently constructed?
Mary talked to Building about that during our break.
So with that, the hoop houses would need to be a permanent structure that do not require a foundation. They would need to be anchored down, but it wouldn't be the similar foundation for that permanent structure. And with that, the electrical mechanical installation would be an allowable use within hoop houses as long as they are permanent and anchored.
Thank you.
So by permanent, what does that mean? That has to stay year round? Is that the actual, like the ribbed part of it too?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not
That's my understanding.
Not just the pipe or the hoop or whatever.
Right. So the pipe would have to stay, but not the vinyl though, right? That doesn't.
Well, I would assume that these things wouldn't be left out in the elements, or else they wouldn't be able to be utilized the following year. So with that, it's all going to have to be based on how it's applied for with the building safety division for them to be able to approve it. But my assumption is that this equipment would need to be taken down for winterization at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But the framework itself would be permanent. Creates less ground disturbance over time.
Apologize, I've kind of lost track where we are in procedural regarding hoop houses. So have we taken public input or are we open to public?
We took some last week, I think, but I don't know that we took.
But we haven't done it today.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So is there anything, questions from the task force? Not, we'll go to public input. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is just observational, going through the dialogue. It seems, and maybe the experts here in the room could explain it. But I've been in greenhouses that didn't have a concrete foundation. My parents had one. We grew tomatoes, cucumbers, and things like that. I've been in extremely large greenhouses without a slab foundation. So it seems that one of the showstoppers, at least until Mary introduced her report out, is the concern about a slab. There seems to me that a greenhouse without a slab, is that possible? And does that protect the land or allow the land to be, used, the soil underneath it to be used?
I think that's the assumption that we've been going through so far, but we can work on getting.
One of the biggest things to discern between the two uses is residential and commercial. So that's where the California Building Code may have some suggestions for one side of that argument that don't meet the requirements of the other.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way forward because the greenhouse infrastructure seems to be more robust than the hoop house, but it seems to be the concern is the slab harms the soil. So if there's another type of surface that can be employed, whether it's geotextile or some other technology, I'm not smart enough to know. It's been a decade or more since I've been working with greenhouses. So I'm just wondering if there's a way forward to find a middle ground.
Thank you. Any other in the room? Go ahead, Autumn.
Yeah, I just want to make some clarifications. I've run hoop houses for many years, and hoop houses are always on dirt floor. They're never on a concrete slab. The posts are drilled in, but the way that Lake County has passed greenhouses as an agricultural use with the spaces between them doesn't allow you to gutter connect your greenhouses. So it's actually cost prohibitive for farmers to implement them. We looked at it and couldn't do it. Another reason is your heights are too low. So you can't actually get a tractor through there to spray anything or use any like large scale agricultural equipment. So past a certain size, they're cost prohibitive the way that they are implemented currently. Unless you went to a commercial structure, and then that's where you get into this kind of slab debate, commercial structure versus non-commercial structure.
Thank you. Any further input in the room? Not, we'll go to Zoom. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Bodner. It certainly is one concern that greenhouses as a commercial structure require slabs, and that's a concern about the health of the soil and this question of, are we actually preserving and protecting farmland if we're paving it over, which I would say is resounding no. But there are a lot of other concerns as well. And this hoop house discussion is being proposed as a potential middle way where the community and the industry could find a path forward. And I want to say explicitly that forcing into greenhouses would be a project killer. The economics of cannabis cultivation at this time are simply that you cannot afford to put all of your cannabis inside greenhouses. It would be, in effect, a ban, even if the intention was to find a middle way. So I think that hoop houses, as many operators said in our last meeting, could be a middle way. And in terms of the specs of hoop houses that have been permitted in the County of Lake, I would recommend that this task force be presented with the temporary hoop house ordinance that was adopted within the last year by the Board of Supervisors, because it has very clear specifications. And one of the goals of that temporary hoop house ordinance was to minimize the footprint and the impact of hoops. So they can't be left up year round. They have to be taken down in a way that once they're taken down, the soil is available for anything, right? They're not permanent structures. They're not going to be up all the time. And by taking them down, you're also helping with weatherization, or rather the hoops don't get weathered and then start to deteriorate and leave trash out or get blown over by storms. So I think that ordinance, if we're seriously considering hoops as a path, that temporary hoop house ordinance should be in front of the task force so they can look at, is that the same approach? Do they want to use the same specs that were spelled out in that ordinance, which was recently decided on? Thanks.
Sarah. Who's next? Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Maria. First, can you clarify for me, is there a difference between permanent hoop houses and temporary hoop houses? Is that what we're discussing right now? Is there a difference between, are we discussing like permanent hoop houses where the hoops are going to stay, but the plastic will come off of the top at the end of the season?
What we have so far is that the hoop house must be permanent if it's to house filtration equipment.
Okay, so it would need to be sufficient to be able to have electrical, because I remember during temporary hoop houses that they couldn't have electrical in them, right? Because there was the risk of the weight and that kind of thing. So we're talking about a permanent hoop house that would go through building and have electrical. And so if that's the discussion that we're having, I would maybe request that that we send out something to the fire protection district for their input if we're proposing more hoop houses out into these rural areas that are going to have electrical. I think their input would be helpful on this as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay. Yes, Richard Durham. As far as somebody was mentioning slabs and greenhouses, a slab and a foundation are actually two different things. So you can have a greenhouse with a footing and no slab. And so with that, I'll leave that. But I do agree with Ms. Bogner on her statement. And as far as the previous public input, if I would consider allowing a galvanized steel hoop house to stay in place without the plastic covering, but the PVC hoop house to be removed in its entirety at the end of the year. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Richard. Any further hands? It looks like there's still one.
No, it was just, yep.
Go ahead, Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, I fully agree with Sarah on this. You know, the difference between 1,000 square foot hoop house and 1,000 square foot greenhouse is about $49,000. Adding electrical, permitting, all that stuff, doing it to code, or else it's just so uneconomical. The margins aren't there for this business to really work if you're spending that kind of money. To do an acre of greenhouse or an acre of greenhouse with slab or a footing is going to be $1 million. And just people, it doesn't make economical sense to run a business like that in this time frame and like where the numbers are at. And, you know, it's unlikely the numbers are going to go back up. So it kind of just kicks everybody out. And then especially if we add in those other preserved lands, there's just no path to doing anything. And if that's the case, you know, if we're going to add all those lands in and make it so you have to grow on greenhouses and not just their textbook, their
Hey,
old.
Jordan.
Yeah.
If you could keep it to the item.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to have to build, or I mean, you can't build greenhouses affordably to make the business work is I guess my point. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, was that the last hand in Zoom?
Yes.
We'll bring it back to the room. Go ahead, Andrew.
Andrew Dobbs Kramer. Just want to offer a little bit of clarity on some definitions here. Greenhouses are typically permanent structures with building permits that aren't taken down or put up each year. They stay. Hoop houses are temporary as defined by the Hoop House Ordinance, which requires their removal after 180 days. Greenhouses that are going to be built in this climate to withstand all 4 seasons here are going to be incredibly expensive and require significant foundations or footings. Whether or not it's a full slab, you're going to be talking about a lot of concrete being poured. So maybe not an ideal solution here. So while hoop houses are also not ideal for a number of reasons, pure outdoor is the most economically viable solution for the industry. Hoop houses are certainly a better compromise solution than forcing everybody in these areas into engineered greenhouses with footings on prime soil.
Thanks. Did you have your hand up?
Well,
I wasn't sure if you did.
No.
Okay.
Part of the national.
All right. Are we done with first scenes? Go ahead, Autumn.
This one sentence, I just built a greenhouse recently. It's about $25 to $28 a square foot for a fully engineered light up greenhouse. They're very expensive. They're almost as much as an indoor facility now.
Okay, we're going around for seconds. Go ahead, Angela.
I'll be fast, Maria. Just out of curiosity, because it was brought up at the last topic regarding the water board issue, and if the board of supervisors already wanted it, that the task force should keep it. Doesn't that kind of fall into this as well? If this ordinance was already passed by the board of supervisors and this is what they wanted, shouldn't we just keep it? Just something. Thank you.
Okay, bringing it back to the task force for discussion.
Could I get a rundown quickly on is it the number of projects in the existing FPZ that have been able to convert?
There are 5 projects in FPZ that haven't been able to convert, 1 that has expired, and 1 that's in the conversion process.
Okay, so one of the...
And the others that are in FPZ are proposed as mixed light greenhouse already, so they didn't have to convert.
Okay.
So what happens next with the 5 that haven't been able to convert?
They will expire.
And then one more question. If a slab was not poured, what's the process for a non-concrete floors? How much grading and impaction of the soil and materials are brought in and put on top of that prime soil in order to create a non-slab foundation?
So without knowing California building code off the top of my head, I can tell you some likely ideas will be either pure footings or anchoring of the sides. I can't give you the specification of how many feet there would need to be an anchor between anchors, but those are likely 2 options.
What was your question, Nora?
Just the amount of potential detriment to prime soils with even a non-slab foundation in terms of the need for grading or impacting the soil in order to hold the structure.
Okay. I'm gonna get our chief building official and see if he can help.
That's great.
As much as is possible, I'm gonna try to get your questions answered in real time by staff as much as is acceptable so that we can keep moving forward. I'm totally not a building regulation person either.
Yeah. I wonder whether potentially an amendment to the hoop house ordinance impact only in FM and P, now the potential FPZ zones, to make them large enough for tractors and or airflow, etc., might be in order here. So I'll put that to the.
I sent a question to Jack, our chief building official, to see if a greenhouse could be constructed without a slab. He says he thinks yes, but not a processing facility, but we're going to get him now anyway, so that'll help with our clarification questions on.
They can. I have an engineered greenhouse without a slab.
Now you tell us.
Sorry.
But we can still find out the compaction stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you need to get into
Hey, we had some greenhouse questions.
I'll try my best.
Jack Smalley. So the first one was, can a greenhouse be built without a slab? We already answered that one. But then.
Was the answer yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the answer was yes. And then further though, what type of earth compaction has to take place prior to construction of a greenhouse without a slab?
Well, I don't know if compaction would be so important unless they were putting something else in there, but if they're just going to grow in there, that's going to compact the soil itself. They are going to have to be permanently attached to the ground with footings or piers, things like that.
Do we have any other questions for building safety stuff?
So it seems like, to answer Nara's question, the answer would be minimal detrimental impacts to prime farmland.
Minimal compaction.
Except that you have a non-permeable covering that does affect the ecology of the soil. And a permanent structure.
I just meant specific to the question that was asked, which was regarding soil compaction and additional materials.
I don't want to.
Would you expect to see? Would you expect to see some grading?
Well,
in order to get a permanent structure approved that you might not have to do with, say, a hoop house.
Well, I mean, it depends on how level you want the greenhouse. You know, if it's not a flat lot and you want a level greenhouse, you're going to have to do some grading.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, I would expect so, living where we live.
But it's not a requirement of your department.
No. Because I mean, I've also seen greenhouses kind of on, you know, not terribly sloped property, but some slope to properties. I've seen greenhouses installed like that. Depends on lateral support and uplift. And that's what's going to be important. Because the last thing we want to see is a greenhouse blowing down the road, picking up little kids on the way.
Right.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Just text me. I didn't know who was in here with this, or I would have answered you soon.
Oh.
I had an important solar installation that's kind of going wrong.
Yes.
Really,
Thank you.
before you do,
Yes.
I know that historically I've used hoop houses when there is, any significant grade to the property because they are a little more malleable to the grade. So I think that would be another reason to allow for hoop houses. If you don't have a grade.
That's planned. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right, well, you guys have a good afternoon.
Thank you. We did a lot of succession planning for a chief building official, so I'm very happy. We just appointed him or hired him for.
Is he from somewhere else?
Well, yeah, can you tell? Was it Texas? Yeah, he's got the drawl.
In many ways than one, I can tell.
He's been here for a while though, right?
Yeah, he's been here a long time. So back to hoop houses.
Kind of numb and don't even know where we are anymore. Fully admit.
So in here, where we're in here. Is it specified that the greenhouse has to have a slab foundation?
Nope, I don't think so.
So that was just
I think that was just our
Conception.
understanding.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got that clarified.
Yeah,
Good.
that's
That's kind of
almost an awakening.
Time out. On FPZ or all?
In the
protected
FPZ
lands?
ordinance.
Okay, on FPZ, but what about in prime farmland where it's indoor greenhouse only? I think that's where that came from, a misconception originally.
Let me check.
Did we debunk that last week? Indoor or
It's a valid question.
Is it greenhouse with a foundation? I think that's how it was interpreted from a long time ago.
I would be relieved because I hate to think I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah, and if we could just get rid of that misconception altogether, it's easier to move forward.
So in definitions in our Article 68, an outdoor structure heated or unheated, constructed primarily of glass, 6 mil film, polycarbonate, or other rigid translucent material which is devoted to the cultivation of cannabis.
So no.
But I just want to know if it differs on that one piece.
For mixed light?
No.
For indoor?
What was, Mitchell's project zone? What was the zoning on that land? Or the
County Lane?
Yeah.
Well, Gaddy is ag, but
Daddy Lane is ag and it's in the FPV.
Some of their overlay that was on that because FPZ came much later. Just want to get rid of this for good.
From category in that area.
Zone prime farmland or any of that.
Well, it's ag, so it would be, if it's zoned ag, it's class 1 through 4 prime ag soils. We don't zone ag is class 1 through 4.
Okay.
So there's nothing that states that construction of a greenhouse requires a concrete slab.
We're looking. So far, we're not.
But a greenhouse is a permanent structure and would permanently cover on 4 sides the dirt that's inside it. Or however, I mean, if it's, is there a?
It's 27-120.
120?
Page 76 of 123. Awesome.
What's the process for taking down a permanent structure?
A demolition permit.
Yeah.
So it says within areas designated as prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, and farmland of local importance, as depicted on the current Lake County important farmland prepared by the state of California Department of Conservation. Commercial cannabis cultivation shall be limited to indoor, mixed light, and greenhouses that are equipped with filtration systems that prevent the movement of odors, pesticides, and other airborne contaminants out in the structure. The permitting authority, so this is nothing about foundations.
Mm-mm.
So I think that that has been a widely assumed.
It could have been through permitting processes with the last chief building official too. I'm not sure.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's been put to bed.
Okay.
Those feel like an awakening.
We never have to talk about it again.
It's on the record.
Yeah. Okay. So where I think we left it was this italics, the introductory part. That sentence that started with if an applicant, we're going to remove that first clause and change the sentence to say cannabis cultivation shall be limited to indoor, mixed light, greenhouse, or hoop house.
Only if that's what's moved.
Right. I'm just recapping to see if that's where we are. Okay, so that's the discussion then that has come back.
Limits movement.
Also, yeah, limits, not prevents.
Question. My question is, and it's just a question. is if, under the new understanding that greenhouses don't need a foundation, is there still a significant need to have hoop houses incorporated into the ordinance?
Yes.
Considering, as had been mentioned before, that they're not great as currently written in the ordinance.
I think we tackle the description of it at a different time than include it into the ordinance now.
I think the difference between something that's going to cover the ground completely for as long as that building stands and something that's going to cover the ground for 6 months out of the year and allow for during the rainy season, the rain to go in and touch the soil and for that soil to interact with outside air during the months when it's not planted is probably closer to preserving prime, local, state, important, and unique ag land than putting a permanent structure on top of that ag land. So, and that's not even getting into the cost of constructing potentially acres of required permanent structures over.
To answer the question from my perspective is that there are many farmers in the community that are not happy with the way the temporary hoop house ordinance is drafted for the description of temporary hoop houses, nor are we happy with the traditional ag description of temporary hoop houses. And that is an ongoing fight that's going to have to be made to the BOS or to this group. And either way, right now, there are two different versions of a hoop house that can be used. So I would like to see the terminology hoop house included.
Now like a yes. Then it's still back to the task force if anybody wants to, or for further discussion. I'm not going to push you, but we're ready for a motion if there's no further discussion.
And just on that first paragraph, right? Because some of the other language would be.
I don't know what everybody's going to agree on, but multiple motions can be made. So I want to make a motion just to amend the word prevents to limit, just so that that is done. Like nothing else happens. I feel that that's very necessary because I don't know to what extent any of these things can be truly prevented. So I move to amend the word prevent to read limit in the introductory paragraph of the Lake County Important Farmland section of the ordinance.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
That.
Okay, we have a motion. And was that you, Jennifer?
Yes,
second. Okay. All those in favor of changing that word?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anybody opposed? All right.
Thanks, guys.
Do it a word at a time. Let's get it done.
So is that, we've got two things accomplished today?
So, well, we now understand that we're not going to prevention. We're recognizing it's a limitation. What else y'all want to do today?
Outdoor cultivation without cover, is that, how are we going to change that? Because hoop houses, first of all, are we going to allow hoop houses? And if so, then we would need to amend the language to say outdoor cultivation. Do we get around to that revised? Because hoop houses are outdoor.
I think it had been noted that we wanted to make some sort of language change on A, B, and C related to this, but what words exactly were not decided on.
Okay.
And that's only if an amendment to the allowable uses were to change.
Yep. So I guess ultimately we decided if we're going to allow hoop houses in section zone. I'd like to make a motion we add hoop houses to, as an allowable cultivation style within the farmland protection zones.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
Me, sorry.
Rebecca? Okay, we'll note that for the record.
You don't have to apologize for your opinion.
I'm gonna abstain,
Oh.
just because there's discussion
3 minus 1 and
on the
1.
hoop house or hoop house terminology. I think it'd be premature to add that in there without having that.
Without knowing what it is.
There's already 2 definitions in the code though.
Different definition.
Yeah. Depends on, one's like permitted, one's not. It's under 7 feet, but you can build it.
Will, did you vote on that motion?
I did not vote on that motion.
Oh, I thought I had 3. Okay, wait.
We had 3, that was Richmond, I believe.
You want to do a roll call vote?
Yes, I do. Ruby, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Vanderwall, abstain. Nora Delbaca,
Yes.
Rebecca Harper,
Nay.
Jennifer Smith,
Yay.
William Lyons,
Abstain.
and Richmond Young.
Yes.
Hey, we're a lame duck task force.
Wow.
You guys like it?
We're a home task force.
Only on FPZ.
So wait, we have 2 abstains,
1 no.
2 yays, and 1 no.
We have 3 ayes.
That's
3
3
abstentions,
Richmond
one.
Oh, I forgot Richmond. Thank you.
Sorry, my voice is totally.
No, I'm a bad note
I tried to
taker.
work today, a lot of yelling going.
It does sound very mysterious though, Richmond. I think you are.
All right, so that passes with 3 ayes, 1 nay, and 2 abstentions.
Correct.
So now the language between A, B, and C. Right?
Right.
Is that something that you guys wanting to look back at?
And we may need to look at the language on outdoors in that introductory paragraph.
So outdoor cultivation,
Doesn't make any sense in this context because, you know,
the state.
greenhouses
changed.
without light depth is outdoor.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Is that term?
It's light that is fine, it's artificial lighting that makes it. Yeah, artificial lighting is the thing that makes it mixed light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but light deprivation.
So that's why we
in
need a little
itself
more
can still be
clarification.
outdoors.
Yeah, it would be helpful here if somebody's reading this and is outdoor or going to do it even with hoop houses and no light depth.
Outdoor cultivation without light supplementation or light deprivation or problem shall not be allowed.
We need to address the cover.
Yeah, why don't we just say cultivation outside of the following structures? We do that?
I'm still confused about the passing of the last motion.
The last motion.
You gotta rewind for me.
We agreed to add, or y'all agreed to add hoop houses in this introduction as an allowable use.
3 yes votes, 2 abstentions, and a no.
Correct.
Is not a majority vote. Just in case anybody was curious. Abstentions count as not voting. So
we had 3.
For any motion to pass with today's quorum, you'd have to have 4 of 6 people vote yes, which did not occur. Just before you get down too far the rabbit hole of deciding what the other language is, depending upon a motion that didn't pass.
So Catherine abstained. Go through that roll again, because I think I messed up on my notes again.
It was
3-1-2.
Yeah, 3-1-2.
And we had 6, so we would have needed no quorum. Fine.
Don't like my football.
So you're right. Thank you.
Maria, sorry to chime in, but did you open public comment? Sorry, I had my hand raised, but I didn't hear
we
it.
closed it again. That was a while ago, but
okay. Thank you. There's a lot of discussion going on. I lost track.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm right there with you. Okay. So that did not pass.
Correct.
Okay.
Hence the lame duck comment.
I was wondering about that, but I was too busy writing.
No worries.
Okay. Is there any other motion? So Catherine, you wanted further clarification on hoop houses, the hoop house definition?
It just sounded like there was discussion made that the language on hoop house needs to be cleaned up. But I almost feel like that was something that's being worked in reverse. Like, it just makes sense. Like, if that's the case, that's fine. Let's tackle that language first.
Well, I think we've tackled the language. There was existing language in the ag code. And then this group has already passed the temporary hoop house for cultivation language. And then it was just stated that some farmers are not happy that there's not a third definition.
How about if I read the definition in Article 68? Is that helpful? And hoop house, an unheated outdoor enclosure used for the purpose of growing and or for protecting seedlings and plants from cold weather, but not containing any mechanical or electrical systems or storage of any items. Typically, a hoop house is of semicircular design made of, but not limited to, piping or other material covered with translucent material.
I'll just, my reason for voting no, since it seems like we're trying to resolve this and maybe get some action there. My reason for voting no is just that, if there's an opportunity to have all of these filtration systems that require power in a building that's, less flammable, that would be my preference. So that's the reason that I voted no, just for any clarification.
That the hoop house is flammable?
Well, more flammable than a greenhouse. There's more. I mean,
where are those fire department guys when you need them?
Did that definition assist at all, Catherine?
Yeah, it still does not change my vote.
What sort of further clarification, like, just so I know where we could do some work on greenhouses? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, or if Richmond, if your abstention had.
Oh, no, I would say yes.
Oh, you voted yes.
My abstention.
Is there other discussion that we should have before we come back to this? Or, we don't have to come back to it. I'm just trying to move us forward.
Hoop houses, to me, are a way of reducing costs for companies. I don't care what you're growing, doesn't matter. And they're environmentally much better. It's like you're saying, they can't be moved. You can't let the wind, the rain, the heat get to them naturally. My challenge with some of the stuff is I don't care whether it's cannabis, corn, it doesn't matter to me. If we have a new industry and there's an opportunity to make the cost less, where they can be more successful and something so simple, and it's not hurting anything and it's better for the environment, seems like a simple inclusion to me. Like I said, I'm on either side of this other than the community side, and the fact that it's good to have a new industry that you want to actually be successful. It's going to be a problem for everybody. So, and this is a simple cost reduction that makes a lot of sense. And I've built many of them, other things. That's all.
Mary, can you also pull the language for the temporary hoop house ordinance that we already passed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, me reciting it to you would probably come much quicker than me finding it. So the design standards for that temporary hoop houses are that these hoops have to be, a max height of 12 feet high, 20 feet wide, 150 feet long, and 75 feet from an exit from any side. They have to have a 36-inch path of travel down the middle of the walkway, and they have to be a minimum of 36 inches apart from each other.
So that's for the temporary hoop house.
Mhm.
But
Was there not some power allowabilities?
Not with temporary hoops, with temporary processing.
Okay.
There's temporary power allowed. And for temporary processing, that was in shipping containers up to 3 years, or military style cargo tents that are fire marshal approved, with either a tier 4F diesel generator and an air quality permit, or 100 amp service drop from the building safety division.
Got it. Thank you.
And I found it, if you guys want me to send that to the group. Okay.
You did a great job with the citing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Thanks. On the fly, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. Do people have permanent hoop houses? Where they're
Yes.
not temporary?
Yes, they've built low hoops into their projects that are 5 feet or less. And they maintain the hoops all year round. They don't require a building permit because they're low hoops, but anything that crests over that height would require a building permit. And if somebody did want to put these structures in permanently, they would require the fire mitigation fees from the fire districts.
There can't be higher.
The 5 feet or 7 feet?
It's 5 is the interpretation from our last chief building official.
Wait,
For low hoops.
thought of 7.
Pretty sure it's 7.
He said 5.
I think the ordinance.
The ordinance is 7. Double check that because it was Bill giving me that annex, whatever you want to call them.
Catherine, are you possibly suggesting you might be willing to consider a permanent hoop house?
Information right now.
Okay.
What is the, all the definitions?
Article 68H9. Yeah.
It's not maximum height, but not the minimum.
That's what we're talking about. Isn't it?
The maximum height for hoops is 12.
No, for the non-permitted cannabis ones, I believe that's 7.
So that didn't make it into the ordinance because it only discusses the maximum heights, not the minimum. For
It's
that.
not in the ordinance. It would just be, it's just lives in our.
Even for California building.
It's what we just passed a while ago.
No, that was the cannabis one specifically. There was low hoops that were already allowable, based upon existing code. And it's Article 68H9.
Jack.
Next to you there.
With Steve on this. There are a couple, hey Jack.
I know, that was a while ago.
There was some infamous.
I remember that. Ugh.
Disrupting our momentum, should we go to public comment for the end of the meeting?
No. Plus
13 minutes. All right, so let's put a hold on this one. Back to our agenda. Are there any public comments? So we're stopping what we're talking about right now on hoop houses and just going to item number 5 on our agenda, just general public comment, not about hoop houses. And anybody
on non-agenda items, right?
Correct, on items not already on the agenda, but within the purview of the task force. I don't see any hands raised in the room. We'll go to the Zoom. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, so first question is going to be, are you going to open up public comment back for the hoop houses discussion? Because that was what my hand's been up for. Is that public comment going to be back open? Or should I make it here?
Hoop houses?
No, yeah.
Oh, we haven't? Oh,
we did.
Then yes, absolutely, Angela. We're not going to take action if we haven't done public comment.
Okay, so just since you guys went to ask Jack about the low hoop houses, do low hoop houses allow for electrical? And the way I understand it right now is the hoop house ordinance, the temporary hoop house, well, anything that in hoop houses says that it doesn't support electrical. So does there need to be a permanent hoop house definition before you proceed with adding hoop houses here? Because it sounds like it's going to be more of a permanent hoop house structure with electrical for a filtration system. So
yeah, thanks. We may need to clarify that and have like hoop house temporary, hoop house permanent.
Okay, and now back to are we back in public comment, or are you going to leave public? Now I'm confused.
Okay, now we're still doing general public comments.
Okay. There was no minutes noted on this agenda, and I'm guessing maybe because of the time constraints, or was it just left off by accident?
No, I think that was the time constraints because we had a meeting Friday and now a meeting on Monday.
Okay, so the next meeting will have the November 4th and the November 15th minutes for the next agenda. The meeting on December 5th, we'll have those minutes.
We will if they're ready, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah Bodner, consultant. On the hoop house topic, I can just share from hoop houses going through the political process last time. The two opinions that were most vocal and influential in shaping the policy were from the fire districts and from the building inspector. So I think in the interest of efficiency and time, it would be a good idea to have the fire and building inspector representatives at the next discussion where it's agendized, because I just think their opinions weigh so heavily and that it would be really helpful to have them in the room. On general topics, I want to talk about something procedural because I was really, really confused as to why we were even talking about the FPZ today. And I know we didn't have minutes from the meeting, but the last thing that happened in Friday's meeting was that task force members requested that there be a list provided of the number of farms, cannabis projects that were either active or proposed and have been going through the permitting process for the last 5+ years or more. And staff said they would not be able to turn that list around in time for a Monday meeting, which the task force, of course, understood, and said that information, that data would be brought back for a future meeting. And so my understanding was that this was going to be tabled at the request of the task force until that information can be present. And, aside from a procedural comment, I also want to say that it's an incredibly important policy impact of this. Right now, the conversation has been somewhat hypothetical about a map and a zone expanding, but it's not really rooted in a real discussion of how many operators does this impact and what is the texture of that. These operators have been in a very encumbered and inefficient permitting process for many, many years. And I think the task force wanted that data to talk about what are the real impacts of this potential zoning change. So I would like to suggest that when that data is ready, this item be agendized again for further discussion with more full information for the task force members. Thank you.
Go ahead, Richard. You gotta click that doogie key.
You wanted me, Ruby.
Did you click ask to unmute?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So I'm a cultivator, Richard Durham, and I'm also a realtor, so I wear two hats. So I want to speak as far as highest and best use of land. And the more I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, the use of the land, farmlands of importance is kind of, I think it was put in there actually as a blockade to cannabis. And it's not really fair to the property owners of Lake County, especially those who don't even know that they could probably lease out their properties. And the highest and best use of their property at this point would be cannabis, since grapes are gone, pears are gone, walnuts are gone, kiwis are gone, quince are gone for about 100 years. And so the incoming agricultural crop is cannabis. And they keep it out of certain areas is really detriment to the Lake County land owners, and it takes the property out of the highest and best use. With that, have a good evening. Thank you.
We have additional hands up. Who's next? Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
I'd just like to voice that I agree with Sarah and Richard on what they just spoke about. Thanks.
Sorry, I was distracted.
No, and that was Jordan and then Peter Luce.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I want to clarify the idea here that this is general comment, so I'm allowed to say what I want to say, or are there limitations and restrictions on what I can say?
This is general public comment, right?
Okay, so I'm free to speak. I can speak freely here. Is that correct? Okay. Well, I think some of the comments that have been made in response to CAP's creation and presence in the room today were inappropriate. And I really don't think it promotes the kind of public discourse we need to have about cannabis in Lake County. And I want to be clear that our group is not opposed to cannabis farming. We're opposed to a failed public policy for cannabis in California and Lake County, where the majority of people who've gotten involved in this aren't making money and aren't performing at the level they had hoped for. I mean, it's an economic failure in Lake County. Most people have not made it. If you look at the number of plants planted, it's decreased precipitously. Mainly, this is a failing industry like many other agricultural industries. And if we're going to be successful as a community, all of us, the people who are involved in cannabis, which is a very small percentage of the people in the community, and the 63,000 other people who live in Lake County, we need to sit down and have these conversations constructively regarding how to evolve and revise and advance a cannabis policy that is a success story, not a failure. And that's what I'm interested in doing. Now, I've written a paper that's somewhat critical, but I think appropriate. in calling out the issues in the industry. And I want to be clear. I'll use every legal means available to ensure we have this conversation all the way through the policy process. And that includes the Cannabis Task Force, the Planning Commission, and the Board of Supervisors. And I'm involved on all of those levels. Our group is involved in all of those levels. And I'll just conclude by saying this. I'm sure I can represent amongst the CAPS participants one thing for sure. And people have different opinions within our group, which is a good, healthy thing, just like it is on the task force. We all agree on one thing. Our voices have not been heard in the last number of years. We're not getting treated fairly in this process. And we have every intention of coming, being constructive, being a positive force for change, and working with y'all, including the cannabis industry folks. But this idea that we mix in this, what I think can become, as was demonstrated today, a very volatile mixture of ordinances, advocacy. There's a lot of advocacy going on, opinionated advocacy, even anger and frustration, which I understand. And then finally, policy is very complex. And I don't think the Cannabis Task Force was set up to address that range of subject matter. So I think we have a lot of work to do. And my appeal to everyone is, appeal to calm. Let's sit down and have the real conversation. And let's do the kinds of revisions and the kind of reform, and let's exercise the kind of leadership necessary to make this industry a success. There have been many people here who said, well, I have the right to farm. I think you do have the right to farm, but you don't have the right to throw your neighbor off for items that are indivisible and not excludable that affect your neighbor. And I can tell you, if you want me to fill the room with people, I'll conclude with this. If you want me to fill the room with people, I can bring a few hundred people down tomorrow who feels this policy has run rough over them and they're angry about it. We know who these people are, and we know the community is upset. So let's not get into that kind of stone throwing. Let's get into the business of doing real reform with good leadership, good values, and the kind of democracy I think we all believe in. I mean, that's my appeal to everybody in this room. But I just want to say this as I sign off. We're not going away. And we're getting very well organized, and we're well funded. And we are going to have a voice, and we are going to help reform policies in a constructive manner that include the cannabis industry and include cannabis farming. But to be sure, we're going to have this conversation, and we're not going to be shut out of this conversation. And we won't be treated the way we were treated in this room today. I assure you that's not going to stand. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so we have one more minute, but we have the chief building official back in the room. And can you go ahead and we weren't sure if the hoop houses that did not require permits were 5 feet or 7 feet.
So according to our last chief building official and conversations he had with a board member, the consensus was that they shouldn't be more than 5 feet because then people could be in there working in it. And then that defeats the purpose of having a structure without a permit. Because if people are going to be in there working in it, we would require a permit for that.
Okay, so we're at 5 feet.
Yes.
Okay, where is that noted or written? Or was it just an opinion?
Well, if it is Bill's opinion and the supervisor member, if it is their opinion, and that's what Bill carried with him through this whole thing, and I trust Bill's judgment, and I have the same feeling about the height-wise being low enough to where people couldn't just be in and out of them all the time, because our number one goal here is safety. Mm-hmm. And if they're going to be inside there working in them, then we would need to be permitting those to verify the safety of that structure for people to be inside. So,
isn't there an appendix J that we adopted that has something to do with that?
I'm not sure. I haven't read it.
We'll bring that because I know that was part of the process. And also, before we dismiss today, I was under the impression that producing that map was going to take a considerable amount of staff time. And I don't think that that's actually accurate. So we're conversing right now with IT to talk about getting our map that is our cumulative impacts map, and getting the new state farm soil thing, that FMP, yeah. So we'll see if we can get that for you by your next meeting, in case that's still a help. Yeah.
There is at least one, maybe two projects that have hoops. And I would just like it verified from those projects what their height is.
That have hoops without permits, because we have gotten temporary hoop permits.
Yep, they don't have permits.
How would we verify that if they're not coming in for permits?
Because it's in the project description. I mean, I can call their consultant and find out who it is.
That'd be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
We can take that offline too if you want to shoot me an email.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else? It sounds like we're tabling farmland protection zone.
With the exception of a motion that's already passed.
To change, prevent, to limit.
Exactly.
And the previous motion that was passed last Friday.
I mean, I just mean we're stopping here and not going to keep talking about hoop houses.
But it's not like entirely tabled because we have had discussion and made motions on it.
I vote we adjourn.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
I second.
Thanks, everybody.
Maria, next
All right.
meeting's December 5th at 1:00.
Thank you.
Oh, next meeting?
Yeah.
December 5th at 1? Yep. Ruby, were you able to check the board calendar?
Nothing.
Okay. Can you do that, please? Do you have access to that calendar?
Not,
Okay.
here.
Angela, yes, that is tentatively set so long as we can get board chambers.
Thank you.
We'll get an email out ASAP. Thanks, everybody.